This is LWT, your weekend ITV.
From the studios of ITN, the news with Nicholas Owen.
Good evening, welcome to the programme. Tonight's headlines. Ireland's Prime Minister tries to calm a new row over decommissioning IRA weapons. On the march, 250,000 Orthodox Jews protest against Israeli laws. And so near, but Keegan's Fulham lose narrowly to Manchester United in the Cup. The Irish Prime Minister Bertie Ahern has been trying to clarify controversial comments about the disarming of terrorist groups. He denies saying that Sinn Féin should be barred from the new Northern Ireland Assembly executive unless the IRA hand over their weapons. Tomorrow the Assembly will take its first steps towards selecting the ruling executive. John Draper reports from Belfast.
The Irish Prime Minister says the Sunday Times misrepresented his view. He wasn't saying Sinn Féin should be banned from the new Northern Ireland executive if the IRA refused to disarm, but he does think the weapons impasse could threaten the peace process.
There's no particular change, but there is, I think, great pressure and great urgency that we now resolve it. My view all along is that if we do not find a resolution of the decommission issue under John de Chastel, there will not be possible. The political reality is it will not be possible to get an executive set up.
A recent opinion poll here showed massive support for decommissioning weapons, including among many Sinn Féin voters. And Mr Ahern appears still to hold the view that terrorist arsenals are incompatible with sitting in government. So, while Sinn Féin can, under the Good Friday Agreement, join the new Northern Ireland government without IRA decommissioning, no one seriously thinks the Unionists will participate under those terms. Tomorrow the Assembly here at Stormont will debate proposals to set up the new executive, but unless the weapons issue is resolved, it's unlikely that it'll actually be formed, leaving a political vacuum that could undermine the Good Friday Agreement. John Draper, ITN, Belfast.
The Kosovo peace talks in Paris, which brought the Serbs and ethnic Albanians face-to-face for the first time, have been extended for a week. The US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright warned that if there's no agreement, NATO airstrikes are still an option. Lauren Taylor reports.
The American Secretary of State Madeleine Albright today brought the two sides of the Kosovan conflict face-to-face for the first time. After the meeting, the contact group of major powers agreed to extend the deadline for the talks until next Saturday, and there was a reminder that international military action was still an option.
The parties are well aware of the consequences of failure to work productively at Rambouillet or to continue to wage war in Kosovo. The threat of NATO airstrikes remains real.
The Foreign Secretary Robin Cook insisted the peace plan on offer meets both the Serbs and the ethnic Albanians' objectives.
It would create a democratic, self-governing Kosovo with control over its own police, internal security and a wide range of its own affairs. But it would also preserve the integrity of the Federal Republic and would provide full protection for the Serb community within Kosovo.
With tensions still high in Kosovo, the contact group has warned both parties that they must now seize the opportunity of a political settlement, as it's the only way to avoid renewed violence on a large scale, which could lead to a humanitarian catastrophe. Lauren Taylor, ITN.
A British teacher working for the Shell Oil Company has been taken hostage in Nigeria with his 2-year-old son. Martin Westbury and the boy were snatched in the town of Warri, close to where another British oil worker, Jim Simpson, was kidnapped last week. National Health Service managers are considering taking legal action against tobacco companies. They want to recoup the billions of pounds spent on treating smoking-related diseases. NHS trusts and health authorities are being asked for contributions to pay for legal advice. Nearly 250,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews have held a mass protest in Jerusalem. They were demonstrating their opposition to changes in Israeli law which they claim are threatening their way of life. Our Middle East correspondent Julian Mannion reports.
It was one of the biggest ever demonstrations in the State of Israel. 200,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews dressed in the black suits and hats that originated in 18th century Poland massed in the sunshine of Jerusalem. The aim to escalate their protest at rulings of the Israeli Supreme Court, which they say threaten their religious way of life. In recent decisions, the Supreme Court has ruled that arrangements allowing Bible students to avoid army service are illegal and that the country's religious councils should include more liberal Jews as well as the Orthodox. These are Israel's fundamentalists. For them, religion comes above the law. They already enjoy considerable political influence through the religious parties in the ruling government coalition. Now they have taken to the streets to try to turn Israel into what they would regard as a more observant society.
I don't want anyone to force laws upon us that we don't think that which is against our religion.
Down the road, a counter-protest by some 50,000 secular Jews. They heard a speaker declare that a war has begun to decide the character of Israel. There had been fears of violence, but police kept the two sides apart. But the day's events may yet be a watershed, as Israel tries to decide what the real role of religion in the Jewish state should be. Julian Mannion, ITN, Jerusalem.
President Clinton's advisers have launched a major public relations offensive in the wake of the Monica Lewinsky affair. They're trying to draw attention away from the president's impeachment trial, which threatens to overshadow the remainder of his presidency. Our diplomatic editor Robert Moore reports from Washington.
Very deliberately, the president is projecting himself as a chastened man. No celebrations evident at the White House, and this morning he attended church. He made no further comment on a scandal that has finally drawn to a close with his acquittal in the Senate. But even his political enemies acknowledge the last 13 months must have taken a heavy toll on the president.
I think he feels this more than he lets on. I don't think he can let on that he's affected by this, but I think you'd have to be inhuman not to be distressed by what he's gone through.
The talk now is of leaving the trauma of impeachment behind and returning to the normal political battles for the remaining 23 months of Mr. Clinton's term in office. In the aftermath of the president's remarkable political escape, there is growing speculation this weekend that Hillary Clinton is now poised to run for elected office herself, making a bid to become a US Senator next year for the state of New York. Congress is now in recess, the politicians exhausted by the roller coaster ride of the last year. But amid that fatigue, President Clinton is vowing to push on with his agenda and win back the trust of the American people. Robert Moore, ITN, Washington.
Football, it's reported that Kevin Keegan might now be willing to talk to the Football Association about the England manager's job, providing they approach him. Permission's been given for talks to go ahead by the chairman of Keegan's club, Fulham, who lost their FA Cup tie at Manchester United today by 1-0. United have been drawn at home to Chelsea in the quarter-finals. Will Walden reports.
Almost exactly 20 years to the day since these sides last met in the Cup, Fulham came to Old Trafford having already conquered Southampton and Aston Villa. But Kevin Keegan's revolutionary approach to football with Fulham would be undone by a man that he'd once discovered. Keegan's side did, however, settle the better, only their direction lacking in the early exchanges, and just seconds after their first real chance, United were ahead. Andy Cole, the man discovered by Keegan, claiming the goal. Even if the replay showed Cole had been lucky, a sizable deflection fooling the keeper. Fulham should have been level within a minute, but Gary Neville did just enough to deny the second division side. Into the second half, and again it was all Fulham, United forced to do all the defending. Peter Schmeichel twice denying Keegan's side, an equaliser they richly deserved.
Maybe we could have passed it a bit better, especially for the first 25 minutes of the first half, but hey, we're playing Man United here and we're in the second division, so we sometimes we all get carried away with it, but I'm proud of every one of them.
Tonight, Fulham and Keegan are out, but for Alex Ferguson and Manchester United, the dream of a unique European Premiership and FA Cup treble is still very much alive. Will Walden, ITN Sport, Manchester.
That's it from the ITN newsroom this evening, from the Weekend News team and from me. Goodbye.
Good evening. A bit of a roller coaster of a week weather-wise. It's starting off fairly mild. That's the way it'll stay for a couple of days. But towards the middle of the week, a bit of a plunge from the Arctic, turning much colder. Some snow in some northern areas. But then as we approach the weekend, it should be turning milder again. That's the plan. Back to tonight, though, and most places becoming dry. The rain clearing away from the extreme south. A few showers still firing into the far north, but in between, as I say, mostly fine. A fair amount of clouds, so that should save us from a frost. Temperatures holding just above freezing. Tomorrow starting off dry in most places, bright in the east, but a lot of clouds